We're going to continue with the spring running from the Jungle Book. Mowgli is growing up. He's 17. He's getting restless. Doesn't really get along with the other animals in the jungle. And it seems his time there may be coming to an end. Yes, said Mowgli to himself, though in his heart he knew that he had no reason. Let the red dhole come from the Deccan, or the red flower dance among the bamboos, and all the jungle runs, whining to Mowgli, calling him great elephant names. But now, because Eye of the Spring is red, and more, forsooth, must show his naked legs in some spring dance, the jungle goes mad as Tabaqui. By the bull that brought me, am I the master of the jungle, or am I not? Be silent. What do ye hear? A couple of young wolves of the pack were cantering down a path, looking for open ground in which to fight. You will remember that the law of the jungle forbids fighting where the pack can see. Their neck bristles were stiff as wire, and they bayed furiously. Crouching for the first grapple, Mowgli leaped forward, caught one outstretched throat in either hand, expecting to fling the creatures backward as he had often done in games or pack hunts. But he had never before interfered with a spring fight. The two leaped forward and dashed him aside, and without word to waste, rolled over and over, close locked. Mowgli was on his feet almost before he fell. His knife and his white teeth were bared, and at that minute he would have killed both for no reason but that they were fighting when he wished them to be quiet. Although every wolf has full right under the law to fight, he danced around them with lowered shoulders and quivering hand, ready to send it in a double blow when the first flurry of the scuffle should be over. But while he waited, the strength seemed to ebb from his body, the knife point lowered, and he sheathed the knife and watched. I have surely eaten poison, he said at last. Since I broke up the council with the red flower, since I killed Shere Khan, none of the pack could fling me aside, and these be only tail wolves in the pack, little hunters. My strength is gone from me, and presently I shall die. O Mowgli, why dost thou not kill them both? The fight went on till one wolf ran away, and Mowgli was left alone on the torn and bloody ground, looking now at his knife, and now at his legs and arms, while the feeling of unhappiness he had never known before covered him as water covers a log. He killed early that evening and ate but little, so as to be in good fettle for his spring running. And he ate alone because all the jungle people were away singing or fighting. It was a perfect white night, as they call it. All green things seemed to have made a month's growth since the morning. The branch that was yellow-leaved the day before dripped sap when Mowgli broke it. The mosses curled deep and warm over his feet. The young grass had no cutting edges, and all the voices of the jungle boomed like one deep harp string touched by the moon of new talk, who splashed her full light on rock and pool, slipped in between trunk and creeper, and sifted through a million leaves. Forgetting his unhappiness, Mowgli sang aloud with pure delight as he settled into his stride. It was more like flying than anything else, for he had chosen the last downward slope that leads to the northern marshes through the heart of the main jungle, where the springy ground deadened the fall of his feet. A man-taught man would have picked his way with many stumbles through the cheating moonlight, but Mowgli's muscles, trained by years of experience, bore him up as though he were a feather. When a rotten log or a hidden stone turned under his foot, he saved himself, never checking his pace without effort and without thought. When he tired of ground going, he threw up his hands monkey fashion to the nearest creeper, and seemed to float rather than to climb up into the thin branches, whence he would follow a tree toad till his mood changed, and he shot downward in a long leafy curve to the levels again. There were still hot hollows surrounded by wet rocks, where he could hardly breathe for the heavy scents of the night flowers, and the bloom along the creeper buds. Dark avenues where the moonlight lay in belts, as regular as checkered marbles in a clutch aisle. Thickets where the wet young growth stood breast high about him and threw its arms round his waist, and hilltops crowded with broken rock, where he leaped from stone to stone. Above the layers of frightened little foxes, he would hear, very faint and far off, chug-drug of a boar sharpening his tusks on a bole, and would come across the great grey brute all alone, scribbing and rending the bark of a tall tree, his mouth dripping with foam and his eyes blazing like fire, or he would turn aside to the sound of clashing horns and hissing grunts, and dash past a couple of furious sambar, staggering to and fro with lowered heads, striped with blood, that showed black in the moonlight. Or, at some rushing forward, he would hear jackal, the crocodile, bellowing like a bull, or disturb a twisted knot of the poison people, but before they could strike, he would be away and across the glistening shingle, and deep in the jungle again. So he ran, sometimes shouting, sometimes singing to himself, the happiest thing in all the jungle that night, till the smell of the flowers warned him that he was near the marshes, and those lay far beyond his farthest hunting ground. Here again, a man-trained man would have sunk overhead in 3 strides, but Mowgli's feet had eyes in them, and they passed him from tussock to tussock, and clump to quaking clump without asking help from the eyes in his head. He ran out to the middle of the swamp, disturbing the duck as he ran, and sat down on a moss-coated tree trunk lapped in the black water. The marsh was awake all round him, for in the spring the bird people sleep very lightly, and companies of them were coming or going the night through. But no one took any notice of Mowgli sitting among the tall reeds, humming songs without words, and looking at the soles of his hard brown feet in case of neglected thorns. All his unhappiness seemed to have been left behind in his own jungle, and he was just beginning a full-throat song when it came back again, 10 times worse than before. This time Mowgli was frightened. "It is here also," he said half aloud. "It has followed me," and he looked over his shoulder to see whether the it were not standing behind him. "There is no one here." The night noises of the marsh went on, but never a bird or beast spoke to him, and the new feeling of misery grew. "I have surely eaten poison," he said in an awe-stricken voice. "It must be that carelessly. I have eaten poison, and my strength is going from me. I was afraid, and yet it was not I that was afraid. Mowgli was afraid when the 2 wolves fought. Akela or even Phao would have silenced them, yet Mowgli was afraid. That is true sign. I have eaten poison. But what do they care in the jungle? They sing and howl and fight and run in companies under the moon, and hi, my! I am dying in the marshes of that poison which I have eaten." He was so sorry for himself that he nearly wept. "After all," he went on, "they will find me lying in the black water. Nay, I will go back to my own jungle, and I will die upon the Council Rock, and Bagheera, whom I love, if he is not screaming in the valley, Bagheera perhaps may watch by what is left for a little, lest Chill use me as he used Akela." A large warm tear splashed down on his knee, and miserable as he was, Mowgli felt happy that he was so miserable, if you can understand that upside-down sort of happiness. "As Chill the Kite used Akela," he repeated, "on the night I saved the pack from the red dog." He was quiet for a little, thinking of the last words of the lone wolf, which you, of course, remember. "Now Akela said to me many foolish things before he died, for when we die our stomachs change. He said, nonetheless, 'I am of the jungle.' In his excitement, as he remembered the fight on Waingunga Bank, he shouted the last words aloud, and a wild buffalo cow among the reeds sprang to his knees, snorting, 'Man!' 'Ugh!' said Mice of the wild buffalo. Mowgli could hear him turn in his wallow. 'That is no man, it is only the hairless wolf of the Seoni pack. On such nights runs he to and fro.' 'Oh!' said the cow, dropping her head again to gaze. 'I thought it was a man.' 'I say no.' 'I say no. Oh, Mowgli, is it danger?' lowed Mysa. 'Oh, Mowgli, is it danger?' the boy called back mockingly. 'That is all Mysa thinks for. Is it danger? But for Mowgli, who goes to and fro in the jungle by night watching, what do you care?' 'My, how loud he cries!' said the cow. Thus do they cry, Maisa answered contemptuously, who, having torn up the grass, know not how to eat it. For less than this, Mowgli groaned to himself, for less than this, even last rains I had pricked Maisa out of his wallow, and ridden him through the swamp on a rush halter. He stretched a hand to break one of the feathery reeds, but drew it back with a sigh. Maisa went on steadily chewing the cud, and the long grass ripped where the cow grazed. I will not die here, he said angrily. Maisa, who is of one blood with Jackal and the pig, would see me. Let us go beyond the swamp and see what comes. Never have I ran such a spring running, hot and cold together. Up, Mowgli! He could not resist the temptation of stealing across the reeds to Maisa and pricking him with the point of his knife. The great dripping bull broke out of his wallow like a shell exploding, while Mowgli laughed till he sat down. Say now that the hairless wolf of the Seeonee pack once herded thee, Maisa, he called. Wolf, thou, the bull snorted, stamping in the mud. All the jungle knows thou wast a herder of tame cattle, such a man's brat as shouts in the dust by the crops yonder. Thou of the jungle, what hunter would have crawled like a snake among the leeches, and for a muddy jest, a jackal's jest, have shamed me before my cow? Come to firm ground, and I will. Maisa frothed the mouth, for Maisa has nearly the worst temper of anyone in the jungle. Mowgli watched him puff and blow with eyes that never changed. When he could make himself heard through the spattering mud, he said, What man-pack lair here by the marshes, Maisa? This is new jungle to me. Go north, then, roared the angry bull, for Mowgli had pricked him rather sharply. It was a naked cowherd's jest. Go and tell them at the village at the foot of the marsh. The man-pack do not love the jungle talk, nor do I think, Maisa, that a scratch more or less on thy hide is any matter for a council. But I will go and look at this village. Yes, I will go. Softly now. It is not every night that the master of the jungle comes to herd thee. He stepped out to the shivering ground on the edge of the marsh, well knowing that Maisa would never charge over it, and laughed as he ran to think of the bull's anger. My strength is not altogether gone, he said. It may be that the poison is not to the bone. There is a star shining low yonder. He looked at it between his half-shut hands. By the bull that brought me, it is the red flower that I lay beside before I came even to the first Seeonee pack. Now that I have seen, I will finish the running. The marsh ended in a broad plain where a light twinkled. It was a long time since Mowgli had concerned himself with the doings of men, but this night the glimmer of the red flower drew him forward. I will look, said he, as I did in the old days, and I will see how far the man-pack has changed. Forgetting that he was no longer in his own jungle, where he could do what he pleased, he trod carelessly through the dew-loaded grasses till he came to the hut where the light stood. 3 or 4 yelping dogs gave tongue, for he was on the outskirts of a village. Ho! Said Mowgli, sitting down noiselessly, after sending back a deep wolf growl that silenced the curs. What comes will come, Mowgli. What hast thou to do any more with the lairs of the man-pack? He rubbed his mouth, remembering where a stone had struck it years ago, when the other man-pack had cast him out. The door of the hut opened, and a woman stood, peering out into the darkness. A child cried, and the woman said over her shoulder, Sleep! It was but a jackal that waked the dogs. In a little time morning comes. Mowgli in the grass began to shake as though he had fever. He knew that voice well, but to make sure, he cried, surprised to find how man's talk came back. Mesua! Oh, Mesua! And we will pause there.